Village is the 8th installment in the hugely influential Resident Evil series, and is a direct sequel to the last game. Our protagonist, Ethan Winters, hunts through the titular village in search of his daughter, who has been kidnapped by the cult leader, Mother Miranda. The game can be roughly divided into 4, each location you explore being ruled over by one of Miranda's lords, and the village itself acting as a central hub area between them. What follows is a tense survival romp through the village, fighting creatures right out of the Hammer horror films of the 1920s and 30s. In this video, we're going to be focusing on the designs and inspirations for the various monstrosities you face throughout the course of the game, and there's no better starting point than the Lycans, probably the most common enemy you will face. The Lycans are humans, mutated into wolf-like forms, sprouting fur, razor-sharp teeth, and a bestial nature. We can also see a progress in this transformation, with those more heavily afflicted walking on all fours, becoming more and more wolf-like and sprouting more hair. The werewolf is a classic figure in European myth and folklore, with some of the earliest inspirations dating back to ancient Greece and the historian Herodotus. Herodotus tells us that the ancient Scythians were able to transform into wolves on the full moon. Ancient Greece is also where we get the term lycan from. It's a shortening of the word lycanthropy, derived from the ancient Greek word lycanthropos, meaning literally wolf person. More recently, the term lycan was also used to describe the werewolves in the spandex ballet 2003's film Underworld. The werewolf has been a staple of horror throughout all of film history, with the first werewolf film being released in 1913. The Lycans in Village also bear some design similarities to the classic design of 1941's The Wolfman. Moving on, we head to Castle Dimitrescu and the sexy vampire lady herself. Lady D and her squad of Black Parade cosplaying daughters are obviously inspired by the vampire myth, specifically rooted in stories of vampiric noblemen such as Dracula. The Dimitrescus inhabit a castle in Romania and prey on the local villagers for sustenance, just like Dracula. The fictional character of Dracula was inspired by the 15th century ruler, Vlad the Impaler, today considered a national hero for Romania for his actions in fighting the Ottoman Empire. Vlad's father, also Vlad, was named Vlad Dracul after joining the Order of the Dragon, a knightly order tasked with defending Christendom. This gave Vlad the Younger the patronymic name Dracula, meaning son of the dragon. This inspiration is referenced in the game's concept art when talking about Lady D's final form. Here she takes the appearance of a twisted, white dragon in a final attempt to crush Ethan. Lady D's 3 daughters are also roughly analogous with the 3 brides of Dracula, his vampire subordinates. In the original novel, they are actually referred to as sisters, and they use their beauty to try and seduce Jonathan Harker so that they can feast on him. The daughters' lines directed towards Ethan can be strangely sexual, and they are determined to feed on him, biting his neck on some of their attack animations and calling him their prey. Dracula, as a story, is often considered to represent 2 broader fears in society. Dracula represented the fear of the outsider, feasting on good British women. Dracula was the original Mr. Steal Your Girl. In a more broader sense, he and other vampires represent the excess and exploitation of the ruling classes, literally sucking the blood from those beneath them. However, there are other influences in Lady D and her daughter's design, both European and Japanese. The cellars of Castle Dimitrescu are flooded with blood, and this, combined with their imprisonment and murder of young women, draws similarities to the actions of one Elizabeth Bathroy, a Hungarian noblewoman said to have killed hundreds of girls and women between 1590 and 1610, with rumours stating that she drank and bathed in their blood. And in regards to her visual design, Lady D also harkens to the Japanese myth of the Hachi Sakasuma, or the 8 feet tall woman, a yokai, or ghost, who hunts and kidnaps children whilst wearing a white dress and a wide-brimmed hat. The castle is also where we're introduced to the Moroaka, a basic enemy like the Lycans we see a lot of throughout the game. The Moroaka are named after the Moroi, a creature from Romanian folklore. They can be likened to a pre-Dracula take on the vampire, twisted, desiccated ghouls that rise from their grave to draw energy from the living. Moving on to the next lord, we have Donna Beneviento, and her utterly terrifying doll, Angie. According to the concept art found within the game, Donna's design was originally centered around the concept of ghosts. The gameplay in Donna's section of the game is completely unique. Ethan's weapons are taken away, and there is a much stronger focus on suspense and horror as you traipse around Donna's seemingly haunted house. Doors opening by themselves and the paintings falling off the walls bring to mind poltergeists, a German word originally meaning noisy ghost. Throughout the section, Ethan is also haunted by visions of his wife Mia, who, at this point in the game, he believes to be dead. Donna's character design seems to be inspired by Victorian mourning attire, further heightening her ghostly connections. To my mind, she also brings parallels to The Woman in Black, a ghost story written by Susan Hill, whose titular character causes the deaths of many children throughout the story. The book was later adapted into a pretty good film starring Daniel Radcliffe, and is also the second longest running play in London's West End. Rather obviously, ghosts represent our fear of death. They are a direct reminder of, and confrontation with, our own mortality. Donna primarily communicates through her ventriloquist dummy, Angie. Angie is a creepy porcelain doll that Donna imbues with a childish personality and that she can control remotely. Angie draws from a long history of creepy dolls in horror fiction, some notable examples being Annabelle, Chucky, and this fucker from the film Dead Silence. Angie clearly represents the fact that porcelain dolls are fucking terrifying. Oh my god, get that thing away from me. However, perhaps the scariest creature in this section is the one with the least explanation, the baby. Ethan finds this monstrosity wandering the halls of Donna's home, and, if it catches him, it swallows him whole. The baby appears to be a manifestation of Ethan's fears for his daughter Rose, and more largely, fatherhood. It also bears a striking visual similarity to the much smaller, Sync fetus from the game PT. The third Lord Ethan confronts is the most pathetic. Salvatore Moreau, a strange, mutated fishman, desperate for Mother Miranda's approval, though she can only ever view him as a failure. The family crest for Moreau is a mermaid, yet Moreau himself lacks any of their beauty. Like Dimitrescu, Moreau draws from a number of inspirations, both Western and Japanese. His name likely draws from H.G. Wells' famous novel, The Island of Dr. Moreau, in which the eponymous doctor reigns over an island of animal-human hybrids he has created. This is reflected in the game's portrayal as Moreau as a sort of fish-human hybrid, along with the notes we can find about his experiments creating more lichens. His appearance and later final transformation into a giant fish creature also has parallels in the work of H.P. Lovecraft, in particular his famous story, The Shadow over Innsmouth. In this story, the local townsfolk are said to develop fish-like traits, such as bulging eyes and clammy skin, due to their worship of an aquatic elder god called Dagon, and their breeding with his servants. At the end of the tale, the protagonist realizes his own connection with the town, and starts his own transformation, including a mental one, longing for the day he can join his family under the water in worship of Dagon. H.P. Lovecraft was, deeply racist, and Innsmouth represented some of his anxieties around race mixing. More broadly, however, the concept of body horror can also be felt deeply in Moreau's design, of a painful, uncontrollable transformation into something less than human. Looking once again at the concept art, the developers state that Moreau's design was inspired by the Japanese kappa. Kappas are Japanese water spirits, looking something like a cross between a monkey and a turtle, and on top of their heads, a cavity or a dish full of water. Kappas are found near rivers, lakes, and other bodies of water, and are said to drown those who wander too close. This design influence can be seen in Moreau, with his hunched back resembling a turtle shell, the crown on his head representing a kappa's water dish, and his constant attempts to knock Ethan into the waters that he inhabits. Moving on to the final Lord, we have Heisenberg, or Nicolas Cage as a Bloodborne cosplayer. Heisenberg most obviously draws parallels with the mad scientist archetype found in the horror genre. He resides in an abandoned mechanical factory, surrounded by his creations, and throughout our time there, we find audio and text logs detailing his twisted experiments. Of course, the obvious comparison we can draw is the most famous mad scientist of all time, Dr. Frankenstein. Heisenberg's creations, the Soldat, German for soldier, are twisted creations of flesh and machine. Like Frankenstein, and in contrast to the other lords, Heisenberg is explicitly stated to only work on the dead, bringing them back to life with tiny generators placed inside their chest, and made to fight at his command. The most hideous of his creations is Sturm, a man with 3 chainsaws attached to an airplane engine for a face, lacking arms after he accidentally cut them off himself. Sturm bears a distinct similarity to the creature Propellerhead from 2013's Frankenstein's Army, though this connection has yet to be explicitly confirmed or denied by Capcom. The story Frankenstein is an exploration of the fear of science, of man playing God and doing things he was never supposed to do. The book also explores the fear of the unknown, but can also be read as an exploration of the fear of parenthood. Frankenstein is terrified of his creation, his son, and of what evils it could unleash. This contrasts with Heisenberg. Heisenberg knows exactly what he has created and plans to use him for his own end. In fact, he even wants to use Ethan's child as a weapon.
Why? Do you have any idea how powerful that kid is?
In contrast to most mad scientists, Heisenberg is both willing and able to fight for himself. Though he primarily relies on his creations to fight Ethan, he himself is a powerful combatant. In their final confrontation, he fuses with a giant mechanical body to try and take Ethan down for good. Heisenberg was previously the most human-looking of all of the lords, so the transformation we see is quite horrific. We see his face stretched across the front of this metal behemoth. Moving past the lords to the game as a whole, Resident Evil Village takes inspiration and story beats from a large number of other horror games. The connection drawn between Ethan's daughter and Evelyn from Resident Evil 7 bear similarities to Alessa Gillespie and Heather Mason from the first and third Silent Hill games. This is also reflected in the opening of both games' respective plots. Both games start with a father losing his daughter after a car accident, searching for her in a haunted town filled with monstrous inhabitants. The section with Donna and Angie has also drawn gameplay comparisons to PT, which was originally intended to be a teaser to a sadly cancelled Silent Hill sequel. Resident Evil Village also draws from its own lineage, being very similar in plot and tone to Resident Evil 4. Both games see a ramping up of action elements compared to previous installments, and see a returning protagonist to the series tearing up a small European town in search for somebody's daughter. Along the way, both Ethan and Resident Evil 4's Leon encounter a friendly merchant and have to put down the leaders of a cult that has infected and transformed the town's denizens into monsters, all ending in a gigantic explosion. In the final boss fight with Mother Miranda, one of her forms even resembles the final form of Resident Evil 4's last boss, Osmond Saddler. Resident Evil Village is a game that knows its horror history well and wears these inspirations on its sleeve. It draws influence from a wide variety of cultures and horror archetypes, some well established in Western canon, others relatively unknown. This comes together to provide an exciting and daunting challenge for players to take on, and allows them to grip onto the known elements whilst also exploring the folklore of a number of cultures they may not have experienced. All in all, the game is an excellent addition to the series, and one of the best games released this year so far. If you haven't played it yet, I highly recommend you check it out, and if you can manage it, the hardcore difficulty will keep you on the edge of your seat. For all of you out there, thank you for watching, and please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe in order to keep the horrors of the YouTube algorithm at bay. And if there's any influences you think I might have missed, let me know in the comments. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.